I'm not kidding when I say that Luke chapter 5 is probably my favorite chapter in the entire gospel account, because it shows us how relational Jesus really is. I mean, that's our goal, right? In studying the gospel, we want to know Christ better through knowing his story. And Luke chapter 5 spoke so loudly to me about how much Jesus desires a relationship with each one of us. The beginning of the chapter talks about Jesus's new relationship with some of the men who would become his first and then his closest disciples. And I love watching the relationship between Jesus and Peter unfold in the New Testament, because I so identify with Peter. I mean, if you know anything about him, he was a hot mess, and God used him in mighty ways. And I am so aware of how much of a hot mess I am, and I pray that over my life, Lord, that you would use me like you did Peter in mind-blowing ways for the kingdom. Just do something with my life that matters and that leaves a mark. That's my prayer. So I love watching this relationship unfold. Now, what I would suggest to you is, when you read Luke chapter 5, go read John chapter 1. The initial meeting between Jesus and Peter, it's fascinating. And it will give you some insight into what their first meeting actually looked like. So Andrew, Peter's brother, was a disciple of John the Baptist, and as John's ministry kind of decreased and Jesus's ministry increased, John encouraged his disciples to follow Jesus, follow the Messiah, because this is the man that I was pointing you to from the beginning. And Andrew was one of those. So he left John and started following Jesus, and he introduced his brother Peter to Jesus. And I just adore John chapter 1 verse 42, when Jesus meets Peter for the very first time. And man, like, Jesus is omniscient, right? So he knows Peter, and he knows him intimately, but Peter doesn't know him yet. And I wonder if Jesus got really excited in that moment, knowing the relationship that they were going to have. And he spoke over Peter. He told him that you are Simon, but you will be Peter. I love that Jesus did that, because he does that with each one of us. When we meet him, we might not get to audibly hear him say that, but he speaks that over us. You are Danielle right now. You're a hot mess, but you will be this. And then he spends your entire life bringing you through that process, just like he did for Peter. I love that. So in Luke chapter 5, we get to see the beginning of that relationship really starting to form. So, I mean, I know just from relationships that relationships take time to build. If you actually are going to end up having a deep relationship with somebody, it doesn't happen overnight. So there's kind of an initial meeting part where then you decide, yeah, I kind of like that person. I'd like to spend a little bit more time with them. And then you start spending time with them, and you hear what other people have to say about them. But the relationship is really, it only develops when the two of you have your really deep moments. And so Luke chapter 5 kind of shows us some of the beginning of those. Jesus and Peter knew each other, and Jesus shows up where Peter's working. So he comes to Peter in this chapter, and then he has Peter take him out on the water. And I mean, Peter's listening to him the whole time teach the crowds, right? So I mean, Peter's soaking it all in, and then Jesus turns to Peter and asks Peter to cast his nets back out to catch fish. And Peter's like, dude, we were working all night and we didn't catch any fish. But after he'd been listening to Jesus talk, he's like, well, if you say to try again, we'll try again. And then when the results happened and there was just an exorbitant amount of fish caught, Peter's reaction is just so genuine. I mean, he's face to face with the fact that this man really is the Christ. And it's like we get to see his shift moment, his moment when everything just shifted in his head. And he went from being a crowd follower of Jesus to having a personal encounter with Christ. And the result was he was face to face with his own unworthiness. And he says that, Lord, please leave me. I'm too much of a sinner to be around you. I can't even tell you how many times I've said that to Jesus after having like a personal encounter with him, because he's just so much. He's so much, and I'm just not. And I'm so aware of that, and Peter was too. But I love the results after Peter made that declaration. What did he do? The word tells us in chapter 5, verse 11, that when they landed, they left everything and they followed Christ. So Peter tells Jesus to leave him, but then he chooses to chase him with everything that he has. And then the result of that is going to be that Peter was part of the inner circle, the guys that would know Jesus better than anybody would ever know him while he walked on this earth. And I love seeing that. I love that, because my big desire in life is just to know Christ, to know him as intimately as I possibly can. And so I crave those personal encounters. I want those moments where I am just like, I'm faced with Christ, where I see him in a brand new way, and then I choose to just push through, to drop something else, to leave everything behind, and to just pursue him, and to go after being part of that inner circle. And that spoke so highly to me. I love that Jesus was willing to meet Peter. He knew that the relationship would take time, and so he came to where Peter was, and he just started drawing him in. And he does that to us. He's done that to me my entire life. I can look back and see all of his fingerprints, his moments where I've encountered him, and he's drawn me to him. So I love seeing how relational he is. It's easy to think that God is so big and that he's just out there, but really he comes to where we are. Right now he's hanging out in my dining room with me, and he just wants me to know him more. And I love that. I love who he is.